Serious, people who have sleep paralysis demons, what's that like? Usually whenever I have them, they appear in the corner of my room. They're tall and impossibly thin, with large and long hands. All pitch shadows with red circles where eyes should be. They sorta resemble people. They usually just come up and sit on the edge of my bed and pat my knee gently as if to comfort me. They aren't mean or anything. They go between looking at me and just looking at things around my room, reading posters, etc. Eventually they sorta just dissolve into thin air, and then they're gone. It's a weird experience, but I'm glad it's not deeply horrifying. Same. Very tall shadow with glowing eyes. But there was one time I partially wake up. Couldn't move my body, just open and close my eyes. Every time I closed and opened my eyes, the shadow figure get closer. Then I felt it on me. It felt so cold to touch. I closed my eyes and said inside me, get away. Get away. Please. Move. Move your hand. Do anything. Then I finally regained control over my body. I grabbed my cell phone and turned on the lantern. I illuminated every corner, but it was gone. I turned on the lights, but couldn't go back to sleep. I wasn't able to sleep with the lights turned off for about 2 weeks. Worst experience ever. I had it once. Mine was tall and slender, like if a kid tried to draw a tall person. Impossibly slender. But at the same time not enough that I'd be like, that can't be real. Blacker than night and wispy on some edges. Didn't move much, and that was the scary part. Just caressed the end of my bed like he was going to come onto it. But he never did. Shit, I'm having flashbacks. I forgot this was even a thing. I don't remember too much about it, but I remember it was one of the scariest things I ever experienced in my life. Based on the room I remember this picture, I am pretty sure it was when I was taking an anti-smoking pill that starts with an L. I've had sleep paralysis like twice. I never had any visual hallucinations though. Just auditory hallucinations. Both times it was the deafening sound of television or radio static. One of the times freaked me out because I had my radio on, so I thought that something was messing with it. Tried to get up to see what was going on with it and realized I couldn't move. Luckily I was familiar with sleep paralysis and was able to wake myself up. I've a strange demon. He is old, like 50 years. Is bald somewhat and has a very satanic face with a beard. He grabs me from my back and sequesters me too much that I scream and scream until my mom or brother comes to my room to wake me up. This doesn't happen when I am sleeping straight or on the left side, but happens when I am sleeping on right. That means even without any weight on my body I feel him. It has been 4 months since I last saw him. I am poor at drawing, but I've seen him so much that I can describe his facial features. Update. There's frequently an auditory component to my sleep paralysis. I intuitively know they are on the other side of my bedroom door, soon to enter. The auditory part consists of the times when I can hear. This is a bit more of a dreamlike sensation, savage knocking and rattling. That part is pure f-king torture. Through college and few years after, I had sleep paralysis fairly often. It was never the same hallucination. The first experience was Samara from The Ring hanging over me and dripping water onto me. Woke up drenched in sweat. I've also just seen the shadows of people on the wall while they spoke nonsense from the foot of my bed. Seemingly with ill intent, but I couldn't understand them. Most of the time it was too dark for me to see. So it would just be the feeling of something pressing down on me, forcing me into the mattress. And usually accompanied by exaggerated house sounds or the sounds of nature outside of my window was open. Before I was diagnosed with narcolepsy and found out about sleep paralysis, I thought I had ghost encounters with touching and telekinetic stuff and everything. This new information made sense of my life again. Finding out I had narcolepsy even late in my life made a lot of sense about a lot of strange experiences I had in my life previously. I had previously thought narcolepsy was just falling asleep randomly. I used to have them when I was younger. I would always wake up and 3 blobbish black masses would be at the foot of my bed. No faces but blacken, more rezo than their bodies, and sunken in where their face should have been. No sharp lines or distinct figures. Just 3 separate blobs floor to about 6 feet long. Couldn't move. Felt like I couldn't breathe. And I would just have to lay there until they dissipated. They weren't violent but felt malevolent. Felt like hours until they left, but I had no sense of how much time would pass. I would like to note that my mother made me collect dolls growing up and would put them in my room. I wholeheartedly believe those keep the dead inside, but that's my opinion, Nasarosa. My first time, it was a figure in a motorcycle helmet standing in the doorway of my room. My first time living away from home on my own. It feels like your mouth is sewn shut and your tongue isn't there anyway even if you wanted to scream. And your body is stapled to the bed. Or in some thick substance that doesn't let you move. I get it less and less often as I get older. Think messing around with drugs caused it. And now when I get it I can alter my breathing enough my boyfriend wakes up and can then wake me up. It's bloody horrible though. I used to have sleep paralysis once. It wasn't demons. I woke up from a nightmare laying on the bed next to my sleeping body and I could not breathe, not move a bit, and desperately trying to recall that spell to get back to my body, and when I did I've merged to my body. Ability to breath and move returned to me, but since then I can't remember the spell and what the nightmare was about. Pretty scary experience, I must admit. For many years I would have a dream where I sat up and noticed someone crawling up to the outside of the window. It would be an old woman. She would crawl in through the window slowly, staring at me and smiling a wicked grin the entire time. I knew instinctively that she was here to hurt someone. Maybe me. Maybe someone else. But someone was going to be hurt badly. So I would jump up and grab her. She's crazy strong. And it takes every ounce of energy I have to hold her in place. I won't be able to do it for long. So I shout call 911. To anyone who can hear it. That's usually when I wake up. I think hearing my voice does the trick. It happened at a hotel once and someone actually called 911. I just laid quietly on my bed reading a book as they shined their flashlights in. I felt bad. Then one night I had the dream again. The woman crawls into my room, staring at me. I get out of bed and go towards her. This time, instead of wrestling with her, I stop and ask her if she's okay. If she needs some help. Her body language immediately shifts. She's still smiling at me. But it's a gracious smile. She doesn't say anything. Just goes back to the window and crawls out. I haven't had the dream since. I used to have sleep paralysis all the time while I was in my first couple years of college. I never saw demons. Just a lot of shadow people lurking in corners I couldn't see clearly. Demons probably would have been way more interesting. Sleep paralysis is some whack stuff. I have dreams all the time where it's a constant cycle of me realizing it's a dream and trying to wake up but not being able to. Sleep paralysis is on a whole other level. You're just kind of stuck there hoping you wake up. I stopped getting sleep paralysis around the time my grandfather passed on and started showing up in my dreams to watch over me. I had never put 2 and 2 together until now, but yeah. Glad he was looking out for me. I fairly regularly have sleep paralysis. What you need to do is keep your eyes closed. If you try and open your eyes, that's when the hallucinations set in. Keep your eyes firmly closed and try to wriggle your big toes. That usually breaks you out of it. I've had a few sleep paralysis experiences before and I always keep my eyes closed. I've never actually seen anything scary because of it, but it always feels like there is a presence watching me closely. The pressure thing is so true. It feels like I have a weighted blanket on my back that gets heavier and heavier. I usually wiggle my fingers to break free from it. It's terrifying stuff, but thankfully I haven't had the same experiences as other people. I grew up very Christian. When I was 12 I told my folks that a lady with wildfire-like hair, pink eyes and long fingers hands held me down in my sleep. They obviously freaked out. My pastor told me that it was the devil trying to possess me. For the next 10ish years I slept with a tiny Bible clutched in my hands. And when she would come visit I would repeat the Lord's Prayer over and over again until I woke up. At 22 I took a course on abnormal psychology and it touched on sleep demons in association with sleep paralysis. I learned it was a sleep disorder and understood the implications of why a demon manifests itself. Understanding that, I rarely see the demon I named Agatha. Usually when I go through a sleep paralysis event I slow my breathing, stay calm and wait for it to pass. However, during times of high stress she sometimes returns. Even though I've considered myself an agnostic humanist for many years, old habits return and I recite the Lord's Prayer until she leaves. Mine generally only happen if I take a nap during the day, so I very rarely take naps because it happens almost every time. It's usually the feeling that someone is breaking into my home or is walking around my room but I can't really see them. It's more like a feeling. A very dark feeling because I can't move and don't know what is happening or what's fixing to happen, but it feels ominous. Basically like I'm a helpless thing at the whim of whoever or whatever is in my room. It sucks. I used to all the time when I was younger. I wouldn't call them demons. Also, it isn't exactly like a completely detailed hallucination either. Mine were always audible hallucinations and sometimes visual as well. I would have a figure at the edge of my bed sometimes. One time in particular I remember this figure at the edge of my bed in a sitting position mumbling something I couldn't understand. For some reason it wasn't that scary to me. My twin died in the womb, so I always thought maybe it was just my twin visiting me. Terrifying and helpless. It's usually something different but you always know it's there. For me, I always feel like I'm straining with all I've got to scream or thrash around. But of course I can't. That's what really scares me, not the demon or figure or whatever. The losing control of myself. I have seemed to notice that this will almost definitely happen if I fall asleep on my back. So I make an effort to sleep on my side always. I have frequent sleep paralysis. Honestly, it didn't take long for me to get used to it. It's a bit unsettling now, but generally I realize that it's sleep paralysis pretty quickly. A grey alien just crouching on my bed is a frequent sight. And I'm usually too tired to care. At this point my nightmares are much worse than my sleep paralysis episodes. A terrifying, interactive dream filled with despair and without an understanding that I'm dreaming is much worse for me. I only experience this at my father's apartment. It's like hell. I swear that place is haunted. The last time I slept there alone, I left all the lights in the bedroom and TV on. Woke up in the middle of the night. I couldn't for the life of me. Barely breathing. And it felt like someone or something really dark was laying right next to me in the bed. It felt like a super dark presence. And I felt it touch me with claw-like hands. Needless to say I never stay there at night alone. That place is haunted and no one can convince me it's not. I've only had it a handful of times in my life. I never had the typical paralysis that comes with it generally. But I had the hallucinations. One time I woke up and there were fish flopping all around my room. On me. On the walls. On the ceiling. Just a swarm of flopping fish. I remember walking out of my room and looking back in to see if they were still there. And they were. No fish in the hallway or in the rest of the house. But my bedroom was flooded with fish. Of course when I got my mom to make her come look, they were gone. Another time it was a little boy standing by the side of my bed and jovially insulting me. I remember it being actually kind of funny, but I can't remember what he said. Just really strange experiences. Only had one experience. I woke up and this thing was crawling on me. At first, I thought it was my sister, since it was female. But realized it couldn't be since I was an adult and she was miles away. It placed its head on the small of my back and started moaning. Even though I couldn't see it with my eyes, I could still see it. Its skin was oily black. No face except for a mouth with pointed teeth. I've had chronic sleep paralysis for 7 years. They're very seldom the same more than twice. But one demon I saw is a methed out older lady with long straggly hair cradling a baby. She stared at me with pure hatred. Another was a demon that basically kidnapped my soul into a black hole, and while I was standing in his void, he was telepathically showing me what he looked like. He was a gigantic black creature with blade-like metallic scales that protruded off his body. When he knew I could mentally see him, he started drooling and urinating. Another demon I saw took the form of my cousin's wife. There were 3 of her, but their heads were stuffed potato sacks with her facial features painted on them. Those were the more creepy figures I saw that stood out. Not all sleep paralysis is bad though. There have been quite a few times where I could feel my body going into the vibration stage of sleep paralysis, and instead of getting scared I became aroused and would invite the demons to take me sexually. Definitely my most erotic sexual experience. I could feel everything that was happening to me and the demon knew exactly how to please me. Terrifying. You wake up and you can't move a single muscle, but out of the corner of your eye you see a figure. For me it looks like an extremely exaggerated stereotypical witch. Think of the witch from Sleeping Beauty, except the features are even more long and thin and exaggerated. All the while it's doing the Mr. Burns' excellent thing with its spindly fingers and just smiling at me. It's a struggle to close your eyes except when you blink. So all you can do is lay there and stare out as it stares back. And as the paralysis fades it starts to back away so it stays on the edge of my vision. Even if that means it starts phasing through the wall. I remember the one time it happened to me. About a year ago. The strange thing is that, because I'd heard about it online, I figure out fairly quickly that I am in sleep paralysis. My body is completely paralyzed, but my neck and eyes could sluggishly move from side to side. My head feels like it weighs 100 pounds. My room is very dark, and all of a sudden I vividly hear a really creepy choir of voices, which ended up just being the air conditioner turning on. Then, I see and hear my door creak open. Suddenly to my left, this weird, shadowy, cat-like figure with yellow eyes is just staring at me. Eventually, it starts to bite my arm, which feels like a bunch of little needles sticking into my arm. This lasts for what feels like 15 minutes. At this point, I am terrified, because I never knew sleep paralysis could feel so real. It's crazy because I know I was awake for all of it, and I remember it like it actually happened. I would say it's one of the less fun things I've ever experienced. I awoke to my laptop screen illuminating the bedroom of the basement apartment where I was living alone. In the corner of the room was an old hag completely in shadow with no discernible features. From there, she released a swarm of bats that circled the ceiling. I tried to scream and of course nothing but squeaks came out of my mouth. Then, I felt a gentle shake and a whisper of my name, telling me to wake up. The voice belonged to my friend who was moving in the following week, but definitely wasn't in the apartment with me at this point. I eventually woke up for real to a pitch black room. My laptop closed and no witch or bats or friends anywhere to be found. I was terrified. I turned on every light and waited until my heart rate settled down again. One other particularly memorable experience. I felt a low rumbling and then an entire pack of wolves rushed over top of my bed. Completely bizarre, but felt so real at the time. I've had sleep paralysis with auditory hallucinations that were weird but far less scary than the first two as well. They're different. Sometimes it's just black fog rolling over me. Sometimes it's the old hag. Sometimes a shadow in the shape of a man. Always, they creep through the windows or my open bedroom door and get terrifying close to me. The scariest one was a hulking black demon shadow that walked through my door and across the room to the opposite side of my bed. It stopped there while I was thinking, "You aren't real. I didn't invite you here," and struggling to move or talk. Eventually it walked back to my open door. When it got to the doorway I thought, "What's your name?" And it zoomed lightning speed to me, leaned over my face, and said an R word that I cannot remember. That broke the paralysis and I was finally able to move and gasp for air. This was about 6-7 years ago when I lived alone in my early 30s. It was absolutely terrifying. Sometimes I don't have demons at all. It's just a loud, static-like sound. And the feeling of trying to rise out of my body while being unable to move or talk. Happens a lot when I nap on the couch because of sleeping on my back. It takes forever to be able to move and I have to lay there struggling for so long. Sleep paralysis is very fking weird. I have sleep paralysis on a regular basis. But I don't have demons. I am just aware of myself and I can't move. Can't make noise and can't get anyone's attention. The most terrifying thoughts I have are being in an accident and ending up completely paralyzed, but entirely aware. Pretty terrifying. Haven't had a dream like that in a couple of months. In my case, I usually see tall skinny black figures. Sometimes they have weapons. Sometimes they stand on top of me not saying a word. On one occasion it looked like No Face from Spirited Away. It's gotten to the point that if I see one I don't even get scared anymore. They're normally just the shadow people I see all the time. But since I can't move they allow me to stare at them longer. All black. Faceless humanoids. I used to have a problem with my Reaper. But I've figured out how to avoid him. For about a year when I'd have sleep paralysis he'd stand right next to my bed. Stereotypical hooded black cloak. A face that looks like a mashup of the Scream mask and a real corpse. The only demon I've had actually move was Sarah Silverman. I thought it was my roommate. But as she got closer I realized it wasn't. Then she climbed on my bed and sat on my back. We're cool though. Sarah Silverman is my favorite sleep paralysis demon. I only had one instance of encountering a sleep paralysis demon. But man did I know fear that day. I just remember opening my eyes. Facing the edge of my bed. I saw this white face. Black holes for eyes thing staring at me. It took me a second to recognize that I was having a paralysis episode. But even then, I begged my body to move. This only lasted for 5 seconds. Before the thing rose fully. Like a massive shadow. And enveloped me completely. Then I opened my eyes again. And remember being awash with absolute terror. This happened to me only 3 times when I was younger. And it was easily one of the most terrifying thing that I can remember. The first one I had was an auditory one. Where I could hear 2 old people like persons trying to scare me. I don't remember what they were saying but I remember clearly that I was more than afraid than anything. The second time was a neutral one. If I can call it that way. It was just a shadow of a person climbing in my bed. It was not that terrifying. But I was still afraid due to my young age. And the last one was the worst of all. I woke up in the middle of the night. And I saw a demonic looking black face. Smiling at me with his eyes wide open. I couldn't close my eyes or scream. It didn't last long. But it was absolutely horrifying. After some weeks. I saw that this things happened only when I was sleeping on my back. So since then. I still haven't slept on my back once. And I now have the habit to cover my ears with the blanket. Sorry for my bad English. French here.